We are down here in Mobile, Alabama, the 76th Reese's Senior Bowl. The man who has, at least for now, 12 picks coming up at the draft, including number 2, including number 33, the general manager of the Cleveland Browns. Andrew Berry, how is Mobile treating you?
Beautiful sunny Mobile so far. We got some good weather this year, so I'm always happy when that happens.
So you could sit in the stands, you could sit at the 50-yard line and watch. We just finished up day one, well, halfway through day one of practice. Jacques Cesaire coaching the defense here. What's your Senior Bowl process like sitting there in the stands?
So usually for the live exposure, there are so many prospects that are down here in Mobile that for the live exposure, you're really just focused on a handful of guys. And they may be players that you didn't get a chance to go out and see live during the fall. They may be at priority positions. They may be guys that are from a small school that you want to see them against a high level of competition. So each practice, I'll go into with maybe 5 or 6 guys that I really specifically want to focus on and really watch them, throughout the day before going over the film in the evening.
How important is it to see, for example, you mentioned small school guy against maybe an SEC guy or a Big Ten guy, to see when the level of competition goes up, how they can do in these one-on-one drills?
It's very important. It's a big piece of it, especially for small school guys who are productive. Maybe they didn't play NFL caliber talent. You're also able to kind of calibrate what we call their physical tools, against a higher level of competition, and it just gives you a little bit more confidence in the eval that they can make the translation from a smaller school to competition at the NFL level.
And you're not the only one here, obviously. Glenn is here, Kat is here, Kevin is here, Jacques is here, Bubba is here. Whole Browns contingent down here, and the players realize, I think they do, that this entire week is kind of a job interview. They might be walking down the street, they might be getting coffee, and someone's hanging behind them. How do I interact with the barista? How do I talk to fans who may want an autograph on the street? How much of that is part of your evaluation, both overtly or maybe even covertly?
It is a big part, and we're fortunate to have Jockey as a defensive coordinator on one team and Bubba as the head coach on the other team, because we get to see the on-field stuff, we get to see them during the interview process, but those are individuals that get to see how they prepare in the meeting room, how they interact with their teammates, how they treat, logistics and support staff people when they don't think anybody is watching. And to have that insight is incredibly valuable. We have a feel for these guys coming into this process just because of what we hear from the schools, but it's nice to see them interact in a professional environment to really project how they'll be in your building.
How valuable is specifically the coaching intelligence? Like, for example, Bubba as a head coach, Jacques as a DC. Jordan Thomas here as well. Obviously, he's moving on to another job, but you have your guys actually working with the players every day.
It's excellent for us. We encourage our guys to coach these all-star games as much as they can. It's great professional development for our coaches, but it does give us a fair amount of intel, whether it's at the East-West Shrine game, whether it's at the Senior Bowl, like we're here this week, because you do get a view and a perspective on these guys that you otherwise would not have.
When you look at, let's just say quarterbacks, mm-hmm. I asked Kevin this before. Tommy Reese spoke about it last week on the podium as well. What does Andrew Berry look for in a quarterback? Maybe the 2 most important things in your evaluation.
Yeah, I think the thing is just high level, it's about if the player can get you to 1st and 10, right? Quarterbacks make their money in 3rd down, gotta have it, 2-minute red zone situations, and can they get you to 1st and 10? And the way that, let's say, Peyton Manning used to do that is a lot different than maybe how Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson does it. And so for me, there's not a particular archetype or style of player, but one thing that is really important at the quarterback position is decision making. That's a player who's going to make 50, 60, sometimes 70 decisions a game, that aren't necessarily all just pass plays, and they've got to be a sound decision maker. Obviously we have a bias towards guys who are accurate, who are naturally accurate with the football, but outside of those 2 things, whether they're runners, whether they're pocket guys, that type of thing, that doesn't matter as much as long as they can consistently get the team to 1st and 10.
When you're down there on the field, you can see the way the ball comes out of a quarterback's hand here. You can see how much juice he's truly got, but he's working with receivers that he hasn't really thrown with. So you're looking for accuracy, but do you have to take it with a grain of salt because maybe they're not on the same page?
It's a great question, Andrew. So from my perspective, coming into this, you have the whole fall, really multiple years of exposure. So that piece is maybe a little bit less of a concern in this setting, this live exposure. If you don't see a quarterback in person, then seeing how the ball does jump off their hand and their arm strength is a little bit of a better assessment live. And then really just how they learn, teach, and kind of ingest information with a new system. That's a little bit more important than this session, than them hitting every throw.
Years ago, or actually 4 years, I've always heard, who's the alpha? like in the quarterback room. You got Josh Allen down here, Daniel Jones down here, Justin Herbert down here, all these great quarterbacks. Baker was down here in 18. Who's the alpha? Is that important to you?
I'd say leadership in general is important, but I think perhaps how people throw the term around alpha, they usually just mean someone who's loud. Leadership comes in many different forms, and whether you're an influencer like Justin Herbert, or whether you're fired up like Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes, as long as you get people to follow you, it doesn't matter the way that they do it.
Hand size, what do you got? is hand size important to you?
I'd say this, hand size is not important to us. It's really more, do they protect the football? I don't care if a guy has big hands if they fumble the ball all the time, just like I don't care if a guy has small hands if they protect it all the time. So I think, at least from my perspective, that gets overblown.
Jalen Milroe said he's a Ravens fan. Does that bother you?
Does not bother me. We all have our childhood affinities. I was a Cowboys fan growing up. I'm sure he'll be the biggest fan of whatever team takes him in the spring.
Which is obviously the right answer. And along those lines, obviously, Tommy has spoken openly about how rewarding 2023 was with him and Jalen and the journey they went on in Tuscaloosa. You have some insight, obviously, on Cam Ward as well. Glenn Cook knows everyone at Miami. How much do you lean on those people? Pat Shurmur, obviously, Kevin worked with him, is in Colorado. How valuable are those assets?
It is. We leverage every part of our network, and not just with the quarterbacks, but for any prospect, and quite honestly, for any draft class that we've had, we've tried to leverage our relationships within our building to make sure we have as much insight on these individuals as people before we bring them in.
Okay, and finally, I asked Kevin what I should ask you. He said, ask Andrew about the time you guys first met here in Mobile. And I said, it must be like, every other coach down here trying to get a job was in a bar. He's like, no, clearly it was not in a bar. So tell the story.
Yeah, so it was, I think it was 2010. It was outside of the Battle House. I was a scouting assistant. He was like a QC coach. And it was actually Leslie Frazier who introduced the two of us and figured that we would get along. I don't think either of us anticipated that 10 years later that we would be working together as head coach and GM, but Leslie probably had the foresight. So it's a pretty cool story.
Was it a quick handshake? Did you get coffee?
It was more of just kind of like the casual meet and greet. But I don't think either of us would have guessed that the relationship would be as strong as it is at this point.
Here we are. The next step, last thing. After Mobile, next step for you is?
Yeah, so the next step, we'll actually start our draft meetings next Wednesday. So we'll get to the end of the week, have maybe a day or two to catch our breath, get organized. And then, really next Wednesday, we'll start, grinding through, all the players that we have as draftable and all the players that are going through the combine and really put together our first, real preliminary board.
The draft, as Jim Nagy says, starts in Mobile. Enjoy your oysters and barbecue and safe travels, and see you down the road.
Appreciate it, Andrew. Right. Thank you.
Andrew Berry, everybody. He is the assistant head coach of the Browns down here, however. He is the head coach of the American team. He's got his own squad here at the Reese's Senior Bowl in Mobile. Day one in the books. Bubba Ventrone, how'd it go?
I thought it went well. The guys showed, I would say, really, really good effort. A lot of them haven't been out here in quite a while, and I thought that their conditioning level was, relatively high, for the volume that we threw at them. But I was happy with what I saw.
A lot of competition. This week, it's all about competition. Want to go fast forward to the end of practice just now. From Villanova, where you went to school, you were calling guys out for one-on-one drills, and you kind of did it ring announcer style.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Honestly, there's times throughout the season where, most times it happens on the night before a game where I like to change up my team meeting that night, or really my special teams meeting, and I'll introduce guys like they're going into a fight, because ultimately that's what it is. It just makes those guys, get into the game a little bit more, create a little bit of energy, and I felt like we had that at the end of practice.
Before we get to the Browns, I want to talk about you personally. You're smiling, right? I saw that energy out there. What do you personally get out of this? Because no doubt, I'm sure you want to be a head coach one day. What does this do for you?
Honestly, just the ability to have to put together a plan for the week with the staff, a game plan, playbooks, everything top to bottom. You appreciate how hard the job is. Kevin does an extremely good job. A lot of the things that I'm using this week are really mirrored off of what he does, because I think he does a terrific job. So just trying to do the best of my ability, and hopefully at some point that'll happen.
And big picture, you mentioned Kevin. Let's talk about what it means for the Browns. He is down here. He was on the sideline watching practice. Andrew Berry is here. Glenn Cook is here. Kat Hickman is here. The whole squad is here. But you are in the meetings. You are on the field with this team. How valuable is that intelligence as we work towards the draft?
It truly is invaluable. I mean, just to be able to have the one-on-one interactions with these players, not only on the field, obviously, that we're out here for practice, but seeing them in the meeting rooms, seeing them interact with each other in the meal rooms. You do gain a lot of information from that, which is going to obviously be helpful for us to be able to bring the right players we need into our building.
So what does that process look like? Do you guys have a text chain? Do you confab every night?
I have had texts with AB and Kevin about guys that we're already interested in and guys that I need to put a little bit sharper of an eye on. But honestly, like, I watched my entire roster in detail before I got down here. I pretty much told or asked Kevin and AB, like, if I'm going to do this, I need to be, like, all in. So, you know, just understand, like, I'm not going to be putting a lot of work towards the Browns in the next week and a half. So I feel like I have a really good feel for the roster, and, you know, I pretty much know everybody and what they've done this past year.
As luck would have it, the quarterbacks that I think most fans are interested in are the ones that are on your team, notably Jalen Milroe and Jackson Dart. I know it's only one day, right? And there's not a lot of data so far. Early impressions, let's go Jalen Milroe first. What do you think?
I mean, look, his tape speaks for itself. I mean, he's a ridiculous athlete that can run. Obviously, he's a strong arm. I think that he's done a solid job in the limited time that I've seen with him. And you have to understand, too, we haven't had a lot of time with these guys in meetings. We've been here since Saturday. The players have only been here since Sunday. So I think, you know, in a small sample size, he's done a really good job.
And a lot of it, like, even on day one, is like, hey, what do you take from install? What can you actually put that on the field, and how do you process that, right?
Yeah, and even still, it's the first time we've had the coach-to-player communication with the walkie-talkies. I mean, the first time we've had it was on the field in practice, and half the players weren't working right away, so that was an adjustment we had to make. But I think they've done a really good job.
How about Jackson Dart?
Jackson noticeably has this type of, like, swagger to him. He's very confident, instinctive thrower. We had a couple mishaps with the quarterback center exchange today, which is obviously expected in the first practice. You haven't worked with the center. But I think we'll clean those things up as the week goes along, and obviously we're hoping for a better product in that regard, and then obviously a lot of plays at the end of the week.
Yeah, I mean, it's with the quarterback center exchange thing. I mean, you've heard stories about how quarterbacks get to these all-star games, right, and none of them have ever taken a snap from under center.
Yeah, and honestly, like, I know, you know, Ole Miss, they typically run a lot of their stuff out of the gun. So that's obviously going to be an adjustment, and I thought he did a pretty good job overall today in that regard. So,
how important to you? I talked about the thing at the end, but just the one-on-one drills in general, to see the best on the best, to see how, whether it's pat and go, whether it's the O-line, D-line, whatever it is, how important are those matchups?
Yeah, I think you want to be able to see guys going against different body types, different types of matchups. I think that gives you the ability to see different skill sets against other guys', you know, strengths. But I think that overall, I thought our coaches prepared well. I thought the practice was pretty organized overall. But excited to watch the film back, make the corrections, and come out here and have a cleaner practice tomorrow.
And see how it gets from day one to day two to day three.
Sure.
Yeah, and Bills, last thing. I know your speech or your first meeting was all about staying as a team here, right, and kind of building a team. Have you thought about what your Friday night speech is going to be yet before the game?
I have not. I have not decided. I usually don't make that decision until about, like, on a normal week, like a Thursday. Okay. So that would be really like tomorrow. And I like to feel out, you know, what we've gone throughout the week, and a lot of times I'll dictate the plan toward what I'm doing. So, you know, I'll probably fill you in since it's not a Browns game. We'll give you a little bit of insight to what's going on.
Well, enjoy all the Reese's peanut butter cups you can eat, and
too many.
Enjoy this.
Too
week.
many.
Thanks, Bubba.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Appreciate it. So, all of that is here in Mobile, and that's only one day so far at the Reese's Senior Bowl. I don't know that I've said this earlier. I'm going to say it again, or for the first time. This is really my favorite week of the year. The Combine is great. The draft is great. By the time you get to the draft, though, really everything on site, there's nothing going on there except guys walking across the stage and hugging the commissioner. All the decisions are made back in the 32 different buildings. This is where the draft starts, and this is where Andrew Berry and Bubba Ventrone and Jacques Césaire and everyone else can actually work with these players and figure out, do they want to work with them? Because the decisions made for the draft, and in free agency as well, but the decisions made for the draft are HR decisions as much as they are football decisions. Do I want to work with this person? Does this person work well with others? Does this player fit our position room, whatever position it is, it's currently constructed? Do we think he fits into the culture that we want to build? And it all begins here. It is an invaluable resource that Bubba Ventrone is not only coaching, but he's head coaching. It is an invaluable resource that Jacques Cesaire is on the other team, on the national team, coaching against Bubba and getting a feel for everybody. And I'll throw in Jordan Thomas as well, the Browns' assistant D-line coach under Jacques, who's now moving on to Boston College. He is here, still wearing Browns gear. He's still a Browns guy, and he is working with all these players. You hear so often that, hey, I fell in love with this player at the Senior Bowl. And the Browns have had plenty of success here at the Senior Bowl over the years. Jerome Ford is a fifth-round pick out of Cincinnati. He knew these parts. He started at Alabama before going to Cincinnati. DeJuan Jones, right here, right around this 20-yard line to my right, on day one 2 years ago, in 2023, DeJuan Jones on day one of the one-on-one drills blocked out the sun. He looked like LeBron at St. Vincent St. Mary's, just destroying people. And then he, kind of planted his flag for the draft and didn't work out Wednesday, Thursday. But he sat here and watched the one-on-one drills and encouraged his teammates. And the competition here is really what it is all about. That said, we're going to be here all week. Let's get to the Tuesday headlines. GM Andrew Berry, who we spoke with, also spoke with some of the beat reporters, including our own great Kelsey Russo. And the headlines are here. Number one, and Kelsey's already written this on clevelandbrowns.com, AB reiterated what he said in his end-of-season presser, and that is he wants Myles Garrett to go from Cleveland to Canton. He wants Myles to end his career as a member of the Cleveland Browns. Now, he does not and never does talk about contracts, but AB did make the point when asked, hey, if someone called and offered you X, Y, and Z, he's like, nah, I'm not listening, basically. And I'm paraphrasing. Not trading Myles. So there is a headline. AB intimated as much when the season ended with his Monday presser or Tuesday presser, whatever day it was. But he kind of really reiterated that again today. So there's headline number one. Headline number two is that he thought the meeting with Shedeur Sanders at the East-West Shrine Bowl in Dallas last week went well. Used a very similar phrase that was used by Titans head coach Brian Callahan. The Titans, remember, hold the number one pick of the draft. And that phrase was he was raised well. In other words, raised in an NFL world, comfortable with success from an accomplished father who, brought up a good kid. So Shedeur Sanders, good kid, good quarterback. The meeting went well. Beyond that, AB really didn't want to give too many details. But at least, did do that interview. And for those who want to live on draft Twitter, this is just my 2 cents, having done this for a long, long time. You're going to see on draft Twitter, Browns met with player X, whomever player X is. Could be the number one overall pick in the draft, potentially. Could be Mr. Irrelevant. Browns met with player X. And that's going to get clicks and engagement, right, all through Twitter. Don't pay much attention to it. Matter of fact, I pay zero attention to it. They are meeting with said player because they are doing their job. They will meet with every single player here in Mobile. Last year, 43% of the draft came from Mobile, 10 first-round picks, 110 players overall. It is your job to meet with every single player. That's the job of a GM and a scouting staff. So when you hear Browns meet with a player, it doesn't necessarily mean Andrew Berry or Kat or Glenn. It might be an area scout, okay? And it might be hanging in the lobby of the player hotel for 10 minutes just to get a feel for a player. And sometimes that's what gets reported because reporters are in those lobbies as well. Oh, that guy's got a Browns backpack. I know that guy from Kansas. They met. Of course they did because they are doing their job. So Andrew Berry said, yes, it did go well with Shedeur Sanders down in Dallas. As to what the next stages will look like, draft meetings next week back in Cleveland. Those begin on Wednesday. AB said, and then the path to the draft continues, pro days and everything else. So there's that note. As for what looked good on the field here today, it's really tough on day one. You take a lot of the install, the meetings for these couple of days. The players had their first meeting on Sunday. This was the first practice. You're still trying to get the terminology in place. You're trying to get everyone lined up right. The real test for the quarterbacks and the skill players is Wednesday and Thursday, and then the game coming up on Saturday. Jackson Dart had some trouble getting the ball from center. They don't really work from under center at Ole Miss much, but as he pointed out after practice, well, some of those guys hadn't even played center before, and he had never worked with any of them, so you're working through all those kinks as well. Jalen Milroe threw a couple of nice balls, threw a couple of inaccurate balls as well, which is kind of his MO. Now, Milroe made some headlines on Monday when he said he's a Ravens fan. Mary Kay Cabot of the Plain Dealer, or Cleveland.com, said that, hey, spoke to a quarterback coach who compared you to Lamar Jackson, and he revealed, well, I've never really said this before. I'm a big Ravens fan. Had a couple of minutes with Jalen after practice today, and I'm like, hey, why? Well, you hadn't said that ever. He said, no, I hadn't said it ever, but here's the backstory. My dad, his family is from Maryland. We lived in Maryland very briefly when I was a kid, maybe 1 year. So I kind of became a Ravens fan. But then when I moved to Texas, where I grew up, my youth team was the Ravens. So I became a Ravens fan. I said, do you hate the Browns? He goes, no, I don't hate the Browns. Do you hate the Steelers? He goes, no, I don't hate the Steelers, which might be a bad thing. But either way, he didn't hate the Browns. He'll clearly go wherever he gets drafted. And remember, there is the connection with Tommy Rees. Also, Jalen Milroe's hand size, that got some draft Twitter going yesterday. Less than ideal when it comes to the draft geeks, under 9 inches. I can confirm, I shook his right hand. It is a very firm grip. Jalen Milroe has a good handshake. And as Andrew Berry told us, you're more concerned with the turnovers, not so much what one's hand measures, because we've seen hands get bigger. Jared Goff had one hand size, and then it got bigger. And we've seen it before. Carson Wentz had a certain hand size here at Mobile, and then it got bigger in Indianapolis. There are exercises to stretch out your hand. I'm not kidding. Believe it or not. And some people measure one's hands differently. I'm rambling. Players that stuck out to me, I thought Mason Taylor looked really good, the LSU tight end. He had a nice catch. I put it on my Twitter. Maybe we'll put it up here as well, or my IG. He's the son of the legendary, the Hall of Famer Jason Taylor, who was here. Really, everybody from the NFL is here. Every coach, every GM of note, Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry as well. And we're going to continue our content throughout the week, Wednesday and Thursday. More Bark Tanks coming up. Jacques Césaire set to join us later in the week as well, and the rest of the Browns front office. So check back, clevelandbrowns.com or the Browns YouTube page, or wherever you get your Brown stuff. It's good stuff. And now I'm going to get some oysters and some Reese's Peanut Butter Cups. This has been the Bark Tank, presented by Sugardale. So long from Mobile.